My name is Bobbie Anne Cox. I've been fighting this battle against Governor Hochul for about a year and a half now. So the quarantine regulation that we are fighting over is pretty horrendous. I'll just briefly give you a description of it in case anybody in the room doesn't know what this regulation is about. So the Department of Health last year, well, a couple of years ago, but they made a regulation, which means it wasn't a law, it wasn't a proposed law, it wasn't a bill, it was just a rule that was pushed through the Department of Health, which means they completely went around the legislature. They had no legislature input on this. And it was called Isolation and Quarantine Procedures. It would allow the Department of Health, particularly the Commissioner of Health and anybody she appointed, to pick and choose which New Yorkers they could lock up or lock down. They could lock you up in your house, or they could remove you from your house and they could put you into a facility of their choosing. You had no say where you went. They didn't have to prove you were sick. They didn't have to prove you were exposed to a communicable disease. They didn't have to prove anything. They could have locked you up or locked you down for however long they wanted. There was no restriction in the regulation. So it could have been for days, it could have been for weeks, it could have been for months. There was no right to be heard. You couldn't get an attorney and have a hearing before they locked you up. There was no right to have notice, which means they could have just shown up at your door one night while you're having dinner with your family and said, you need to come with us. We have an order from the health department. The reg said they could use local law enforcement to enforce their orders. There was no age restriction, so they could have done this to you, to your child, to your grandchild, to your elderly parent. No restrictions whatsoever. No way for you to get out of quarantine once they put you in there. And what I mean by that is when I was having oral arguments last year in front of the trial court judge, he specifically asked the Attorney General that question. He said, let's say you take a family, let's say you put them into a facility, a hospital, whatever, and they're in there because you issued them an order of quarantine. Once they're in there, how do they get out? And the assistant AG thought about it, and then he said, well, I guess they could get a lawyer and sue us. So that's the kind of completely unconstitutional, horrendous totalitarian power that the Department of Health and the Commissioner of Health gave themselves. It did not come from the legislature. In the world of law, legislators make laws. The executive branch cannot make laws. The governor and her agencies are the executive part of our government. So what they're supposed to do is carry out the laws that are passed by the legislature. They are not supposed to make up their own laws. This was a law. The reason I say it was a law is because it met the criteria that the New York State Court of Appeals, which is our highest court, has set out as how you determine whether or not a regulation really is a law. And also, we already have a quarantine law. We've had a quarantine law since 1953 here in New York State. And the quarantine law has very specific procedures that have to be followed if we want to remove somebody from society because they're a public health threat. The number one thing that our law, not the regulation of the Department of Health, that the law says is that you have to actually be sick. That's step one, which makes sense, doesn't it? Then the law says, the law, not the reg, says that you have the right to an attorney. There would be an investigation by the local health department, not the Commissioner of Health. There would be due notice and then a hearing in front of a judge. If the judge finds not only that you have the disease, but that you're not able to comport yourself in a manner to protect others around you, then the judge, not the Commissioner of Health, could issue an isolation or a quarantine order. And it would put you into a hospital so that you could receive the care that you needed to get better from that disease. The regulation that the Department of Health made just said that they could send you anywhere. Literally, the language says, even temporary housing. So, this is how everybody has dubbed this case the quarantine camp case, because could they have put you in a camp? Yeah. It literally says they could commandeer any structure. They didn't have to build anything. They could have taken over a prison, a school, a multi-family house. It doesn't matter. They could have done anything they wanted with any building and turned it into a quarantine center. So we sued. I sued the governor and the Department of Health, the Commissioner of Health, the Health Planning Council, on behalf of a group of New York State legislators, Senator George Borrello, Assemblyman Chris Tate, and Congressman Mike Lawler, together with a citizens group uniting New York State. And we won. The judge struck this down last summer. He said, nope, can't do it, wrong branch of government, this is a breach of separation of powers. And then after the election, of course, Hope will decide she's going to appeal. So now we're on appeal, which means this court that we're before now, which is the 4th Department Appellate Division, which is located in Rochester, they have the power to reverse the decision. They have the power to reinstate that regulation. So we have oral arguments on next Wednesday, which is the 13th. It's in Rochester, downtown at the courthouse, 10 a.m. If anybody's able to come, I know it's a little bit of a hike for you guys, but if anybody's able to come, it would be great to have support in the courtroom. It's not a protest or a rally. You come into the courtroom, you sit down, you listen to first the Attorney General will argue, why they think that the court erred and this should be reinstated, and then I will argue against them and say why the court did not make any mistakes last year. They did the right thing, and that decision should be upheld.